So welcome back. So now you know where to go to find information. You know some basics on whether something is good, credible or not, and good quality or not. Now, what do you do? How do you actually start to do your lit review? Well, here's my strategy. This is what I do. You're welcome to borrow, adapt some of these techniques for yourself. Well, first of all, I read. You have to read. That's required to do a lit review. I'm going to read the information that's most obvious to me. If I'm in a class, I'm going to read the textbook and make sure that I've got the basic information that is expected of me. So if I'm doing a class on research methodologies and how to do research, and I need to know about some of these topics, then I'm going to read that research book. If I'm doing a class on tourism and the supply and demand of tourism, and I'm writing a paper about tourism demand in a destination, I'm going to read that textbook and make sure that I've got the basic definitions and the core information that I need for my own work. Then I'm going to start with a broad search. So I'm going to start with a broad term. Perhaps I'm interested in festivals and tourism in Toronto, for example. And so I'll start with a broad search in Google or the library, and I'll do something quite broad and just see what I get. What are the top searches I get, the top hits I get? Do they look interesting? What are the really big papers or big textbooks that have thousands of citations that perhaps I should be familiar with to get some of those basic definitions and key concepts that might help me in my own research? And then I'm going to narrow. So perhaps I'm going to narrow down and use some more search terms, use some more ands so that I can limit the search results that I'm getting and really narrow down to be a bit more specific. And I might do this in a couple of directions. I might start really broad and then go down over here into this direction with some key terms. And then I'll come back up to that broad and then I'll go down in this direction, in a slightly different direction with different key terms going in different direction. And so I might play around and see what's out there and what sort of things are really kind of piquing my interest. I'm always going to be thinking about the CRAP test, and is the information I'm finding meeting some of those, all of those requirements from the CRAP test? Is it current, depending on the topic that I'm interested in? Is it relevant? Is it associated with the topic I'm interested in? Is it from an authority, somebody that appears to be an expert or could be considered to be an expert in the field? Is it accurate? Does it have some statistics or some evidence or something that the opinion and the interpretation is being based upon? And what's the purpose? Is it an academic journal article? Is it a report from a government ministry? Is it a report from an industry association? In which case it's still interesting, but we always have to be, realize that there will be some purpose behind this research. So just to be aware of that. So it doesn't mean that we ever have to necessarily exclude something. We just have to be aware of it and how we interpret the information, how we consume it. And then I'm going to read the abstract or the information or the intro online, the introduction. And this should be, it could be an executive summary. It could be, depending on what type of piece of information you're reading, there should be some kind of summary at the start, an abstract in academic articles, executive summary and industry reports that kind of give an overview of the report. Now, there might be enough in the abstract for me to take a couple of ideas that kind of answer the questions I want. It might show me that there's nothing in this and I'm not going to carry on reading it. And it might be that, wow, this sounds super interesting. I have to carry on reading this to get more information from it. I'm going to print or save the interesting ones. I used to print everything. Now I do everything online. And then I'm going to read. And I can't stress this enough. You do have to do some reading when you do a lit review. Now, I used to print everything out and with with a pen, a red pen and highlighters, and I would scribble around on my pages. I now use an app called Zodo, and that's Xodo. And so I use this app. It's free to download. I can use it on my phone. I can use it on my tablet. I can use it on my laptop, and it just allows me to highlight, to scribble, to make notes and all that kind of stuff. So I find this a really useful tool. But as I read, I'm thinking about what am I reading this for? I don't have to read every single word of every single paragraph of every single page. I skim a little bit and I say, well, why am I reading this? Is it because I want to get a definition from it? Am I reading it because I want to find out a statistic? Am I reading this because I'm really interested in the methodology? Like, what's the purpose of reading this particular chapter or paper or whatever it is? So as I'm reading, I'm looking for the titles, the subtitles of the headings that direct me towards the piece of information that I think is going to be particularly useful. As I go, I highlight really important quotes. I make and facts and claims. And if I come up with another idea that's not in the paper, but the paper makes me think of, or perhaps connect to another theory or another paper that I've read, I make those notes too, because I'm looking for those connections to show when I'm writing my own work that I've been able to find these connections and build upon the research that's already been done and summarize and synthesize the topic overall, not just the individual article. And so I want you to think about, if you haven't done before, about active reading. This is super important. The Academic Success Center at Ted Rogers School has some really good resources, and this is where I've got some of them, to be honest with you. So go and take a look. So you've got to be active when you read, not passive. How many times have you read something and you read 2-3 pages and then you suddenly wake up and go, whoa, I don't remember anything that I just read, right? That's passive reading. You've got to be active. There's no point in wasting your time reading if you're not going to get good information from it. So some good strategies are to pre-read. So you skim through the thing that you're reading. You look at the contents page, you look at the headings, you look at the index. So you get a sense of what you're about to read. Is there anything that kind of piques your interest that you're going to be particularly keen to look out for? And you kind of prime in your brain to know what to expect. I'm going to be reading about this topic or this issue, or I'm going to get this type of information. Think about, what do I want to get out of this reading? Is it that I'm looking for a definition on something? Or is it that I'm looking for a methodology on something? Or is it that I'm looking for an example of something? What are you actually hoping to get out of this paper? And keep thinking about that as you are reading it. And of course, what you're hoping to get out of it is something that's going to help you in your own work, to answer your own research questions. Highlighting is really useful, but don't highlight too much. You've got to highlight the stuff that's really interesting. One technique is to read first, read the page or the section or the chapter, and then go back and skim it and think, well, yeah, that was a really interesting point. The risk is if you highlight too much, then it actually becomes a bit pointless, because now you've just got 3/4 of the page highlighted rather than the whole page to begin with. Take some notes after you read. So after you read a chapter, just take a handful of notes, a couple of sentences, a couple of bullet points of the things that you remember reading that were really interesting to you. And now you've done it in your own words, you know that now you can paraphrase this rather than copying and pasting and taking direct quotes. So summarize the key points in your own words. Do it soon after you've done the reading, so it's fresh and you remember the really interesting stuff. You can always skim back over the pages you've read just to remind yourself of what you've read and the key points that you remembered. And in your own notes, make sure you keep that reference there so that you know where you got the ideas from, so that when you start to write your own literature review, you know how to cite it and where you can cite that idea from. That's super important. And constantly keep thinking about, how can I use this? How can I apply this in my own research? Because if you read it and you're making connections to how you're actually going to use it in different ways, then that helps you remember it. And so if you read an idea and you think, wow, I could use this in my own work, or I could use this in my own survey, or I could use this in my own recommendations, that helps kind of the piece of information stick in your brain. So always think about, how could I be using this? And that will help you remember the really interesting stuff.